Ballyvaughan and all around the Bay. We welcome you and your support against the BIM proposal to size open salmon cages in our bay. We also welcome the many game and sea anglers from around the country who have travelled long distance to be here today to join us in this protest march. We have a number of speakers who will address you for a few minutes each. The first speaker I'd like to call on is Councillor Thomas Welby from Up the Raird, Mayor of County Galway, and speaking in a personal capacity. He has supported us from the beginning when first this proposal became public knowledge. Thomas?
Thanks, Willie. Can I say, from the very first presentation we've got from BIM in relation to this project, I've had serious concerns. I'm not going to start talking about scientific or anything like that because the speaker's coming behind me. But I'm going to just say to you in relation to this is basically a political campaign. Because I mean, what's happening here is BIM are going to do a paper exercise to give to the Minister of the Marine so that he can grant the licence out there. That's effectively all that's going to happen in relation to it. Now, you all know and I know there's only one way that you'll stop a political campaign, a political process like that, and it's to have a political campaign against it. But I'm going to have to say to you here today that at this particular time, you're losing that campaign. Because as we walk down here today, there's one TD here with me, Noel Grealish, and there's one councillor standing behind me. You know, so what's happening here today is that there's a lot of politicians that are sitting on the fence on this one. And you're going to have to get out there and you're going to have to ask them, are they on the fence, or are they in favour of this, or are they not in favour of it? That's what you have to do. I've met calls on Galway BFM in relation to the politicians, and one thing that's seriously lacking is the opposition politicians, and Eamon O'Keefe is one of them and Trevor Clardy is the other. These guys are sitting on the fence. They're actually still building the fence in relation to this, because they are looking at this thing of 500 jobs. The reality, there's going to be no 500 jobs. There'll probably be no plus jobs. There will be jobs displacement. Because what's going to happen here, if those cages get out there, between the sea lice and between escapees, it'll wipe out the wild stock, and as wild fishing as we know it, it'll be gone forever. For the sake of a possible 500 jobs, it's not going to happen. I mean, they're not, even when the BIM guys came to us, they said they couldn't guarantee us the jobs to stay in Connemara. First they were promising them the island, then they were promising them on the mainland, then they're saying we'll give them to Rossaville, then we'll say they'll go to Kilkieran. I mean, the man that's promoting this project is like a two-bit car salesman. He has an answer for everything, but he has no concern about the wild stock. So what I'm saying to you is that the politicians, if you don't have the opposition politicians on board, you're going nowhere. So you're going to have to go back out, you're going to have to talk to Eamon O'Keefe, you're going to have to talk to Trevor Clardy, you're going to have to get them guys on board, they're going to have to be talking about it in the Dáil, they're going to have to be raising it, they're going to have to be outlining the major problems to the Minister in relation to it. And you know, I have to say, 25 years ago some guy said here, we had a situation, we had the rod lice situation. I was possibly perceived to be on one side and other people on another side. I'm fully behind you in relation to this now. I've no problem being here today. When I came out against this at the start, somebody said to me, did you come under serious political pressure? I came under no political pressure whatsoever. I have made this stance on the basis of the information that has been put before me. I can see that it's a totally illogic situation, and I have no problem supporting you, and I'll go anywhere to support you in relation to it. But it has to be brought to a national level, and the guys, the opposition TDs, the opposition senators, if you can't convince them that there's a problem, you have a serious problem. And as I say, I'm not going to, that's as much as I'm going to say in relation to it. Work on the guys, and you have to start on the guys from the councillors as well. The councillors in the city, the councillors in the county, you have to work on them guys. If you don't work on them, if they don't think you have a problem, they're not going to worry. I mean, you look at Galway this week. What's the biggest political problem that came up in Galway this week? they stopped serving soup in the hospitals. And yet there's a possibility of cages going out on Galway Bay, and the councillors, they're worried about soup. One councillor worried about soup, and he's the guy that's taking all the press and everything that's going. So I'm appealing to you guys, you're going to have to get up, you're going to have to raise this campaign to an awful higher level. You're going to have to get the opposition guys on board with you. You're going to have to convince them that there's a problem, because if you don't, it's gone. And that's all I'll say. Thank you very much.
Tom's right there. You should start writing to your local TDs. Keep lobbying, 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 lobbying. Our next speaker is Ori Vigason from Iceland, chairman of the North Atlantic Salmon Fund and no stranger to Ireland. He has fought long and hard for a long number of years to persuade many governments in the North Atlantic and North America to stop killing salmon so that stocks may once again reach abundance. I'd like to call on Ori here the words. Thank you.
Friends of Galway Bay and friends of wild salmon and sea trout, it's a great pleasure for me to be here to stand beside you in your very, very important initiative to launch this campaign against the fish farm. Because I think that your historic and renowned Galway Bay area will be destroyed environmentally, and of course the salmon will suffer a great deal. The salmon are returning to the Corrib rivers today and will produce smolts of tomorrow that will head out throughout the North Atlantic to feed for 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, where we protect them, or we try to protect them so that they can come back. I've just come back from Iceland, where we have launched an initiative similar to yours. Fortunately, most of our salmon farms are land-based, and believe me, ladies and gentlemen, all salmon farms should be land-based. In the ocean, you can control nothing. There's no control. And the salmon farming industry is the only sector of the food industry that is allowed to dump all their waste, all the scurry, all the dirty pieces they leave behind all over the nature. That we must stop. We need to remind everybody, and like the previous speaker said, we need to remind the politicians and lobby them. And I will be pressing my message, especially to Minister Comey and his state bodies like the Marine Institute and the BIM, that they have a duty to protect the wild migrating smolts from the UK and the EU. Yes, they have an obligation to the governments and the EU not to damage the salmon by giving them a safe passage through their waters of the Galway Bay and the west of Ireland. Ladies and gentlemen, congratulations for this great initiative, and let's make sure that we win this war too. Thank you.
Our next speaker will be Nigel Green, chairman of Salmon Watch Ireland. This is an organisation made up of angling clubs, angling federations and fishery owners, and is working to protect and conserve Irish salmon and sea trout. Nigel.
Thank you, Billy. It's fantastic to see such a representative group from all over the country here this morning, or well, this afternoon now. I don't think we've had such a representative group of people concerned with the salmon since we had our demonstration against drift nets in Killarney in 2005. We succeeded in that campaign, and with the kind of support that's turned out here today and the advice that Mayor Welby has given about campaigning for the opinions of politicians at local and national level, I think that is a pretty important combination, and I hope his advice on that matter will be taken. The case against BIM's Galway Bay Super Farm can be summarised under a few short headings. The BIM scheme is mad, and involves a reckless disregard for the whole range of environmental impacts, including especially those on wild salmon. The BIM scheme, as Ori has just said, fails to take a precautionary approach to the risks. There are sound legal reasons for believing that BIM has no legal basis for its self-holding an aquaculture licence, and the Minister for Aquaculture, Food and the Marine, in considering the BIM application, is acting as a semi-judge, but he's also the chief cheerleader for the expansion of salmon farming and is totally conflicted. Throughout its championing of the Galway Bay Salmon Super Farm, and no doubt other super farms that it's planning should they be successful in this case, BIM has made prolific use of the big lie. BIM works on the basis that the bigger the lie and the more often it is repeated, the more likely it is to become accepted as the truth, especially by the Minister for Agriculture. BIM have misquoted and misrepresented scientific papers. They have ignored or denied scientific evidence they don't like or that doesn't suit their case, and they have shown total lack of any kind of respect for those of us who disagree with them. BIM's latest big lie is that those of us who oppose the salmon super farm are doing so on the basis that there should be zero risk for wild salmon. I'm not aware of anybody on our side of the argument that has put forward such a standard, but even if it had been put forward, the idea of zero, or certainly zero additional risk, is entirely in keeping with a most unlikely concordat between the North Atlantic Salmon Conservation Organisation and the International Salmon Growers Association, and that holds that wild salmon should not be subjected to sea lice levels any greater than those that occur naturally. And that's not a bad standard if that's what zero risk means.
Here, here.
What we have all been looking for, and which comes clearly out of the many submissions that were made to the department on the project, is that there should be a precautionary approach to this project. A concept of which the European Court of Justice has ruled on many occasions, most recently in what's called the Sweetman case, which is an Irish case, and not only an Irish case but a Galway case. And the ECJ at that time opined that assessments must be undertaken having rigorous regard to the precautionary principle. They've said that the national authorities may grant authorisation to a plan only if they are convinced that it will not adversely affect the integrity of the site concerned. Just consider how far from that standard the BIM application falls. It is time that Mr. Coveney put a stop to this nonsense before the integrity of the state's role in economic development is further compromised by blatant disregards for the facts, for truth and for the law. Having put a stop to it, he should then have a full investigation carried out into BIM's involvement and behaviour in this case. BIM's behaviour has been nothing short of reckless and disgraceful, and is a blot on the reputation of the whole Irish public service.
Hear, hear, hear.
Thank you, Niall. Our next speaker is Brian Curran, a resident of Inburn and a former chairman of the Western Regional Fisheries Board, a past member for 10 years of the National Salmon Commission, and now a member of the National Executive of FISTA, the Federation of Irish Salmon and Sea Trout Anglers. He has long campaigned for better management of our natural resources, both inland and marine. Brian?
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to welcome you all here today, and especially to concerned groups from all over Ireland, especially from those 9 locations along the western seaboard where it is also proposed to establish open salmon rearing cages. We welcome the anglers from salmon producing rivers along the west coast of Ireland most at risk, and some of those would be like the Foyle, the Moy and those further south in Kerry. This proposal from BIM is merely the start of a process to sell off our marine resource to the highest bidders, regardless of the damage that these open cages will bring about. Not only in Galway Bay, but at 9 other locations along the western seaboard. We have serious concerns that our national stocks of wild salmon will disappear from rivers along the western seaboard, as well as international stocks of salmon smolts that run up the western coast. I'm talking here about smolts from France and Germany. We can see here in the Galway region in Connemara what 30 years of this industry has done, and the damage caused to our sea trout and salmon populations, not only in Connemara, but in Donegal and in Kerry. Our marine resource is 10 times the land size of Ireland. There is great potential there to exploit the wealth and aid our economic recovery. Job potential exists in developing things like seafood, like crab, lobster, shrimp, seaweeds. In developing marine tourism like sailing, sea angling, whale watching. In developing renewable marine energy like tidal and wind. This calls for sensible and best use of this important resource. You do not see us objecting to these activities because they do not abuse the environment. We are in favour of aquaculture, like mussels, oysters, seaweeds. We are not in favour of open cages in the sea rearing millions of salmon. The use of open cages in the bays is old technology, first used in Ireland 30 years ago. And look at the results. It's a pity that BIM has not moved with the times and be a leader in new technology of closed system aquaculture on land, now being used more and more around the world. Open cages means no control. No control of pollution or from waste. No control of pesticides and chemicals used at increasing rates for fish diseases and are not working. Open cages means more profit for the operators, because we, the citizens, are paying the price of our marine environment being polluted with the waste and not the polluter paying. Galway Bay will be turned into one large slurry tank. The solution is closed systems on land. This means proper management and controls. No concerns about storms and destruction of cages as happened before off Arran. Safe working conditions for employees. There is a separation of these fish from the environment and wild fish. There's no lice, no escapees, no disease, because the water is treated, not the fish. No waste allowed into the environment. We developed controls for intensive farming of animals on land after we saw the dangers to our streams, rivers and lakes. We must do the same for this industry now. We call on Minister Simon Coveney and his semi-state body BIM to go back to the drawing board on this project and think carefully before Galway Bay is damaged long-term for short-term profit. And finally, we call on the Norwegian multinational companies already in Ireland and the biggest operator of these open cages to think twice before expanding their operations here. In the past we had the Norwegians here who plundered and ravaged the resources and wealth of Ireland. They were called Vikings. At the Battle of Clontarf in 1014, the people of Ireland came together and kicked them out. Beware of 2014, and the people of Ireland will do the same if this proposal goes ahead. Thank you.
I'd just like to acknowledge the three green anglers here today who are fighting to protect our angling rights on our rivers all over Ireland. They are Peadar O'Brien, Fintown Anglers, Sean O'Brien, Fintown Anglers, John Boyle, Ross's Anglers. Give them a great round of applause, please. also like to thank Noel Grealish, Independent TD for Galway West, for his support, and who is also here today. Thank you, Noel. Our next speaker is Derek. Right? I would like to introduce you to a man who, while not originally from Galway, has been to the forefront campaigning for a better environment in the West and on the National Executive of Antashka. Derek Hamilton.
Thought somebody else was next. As chairman of the Galway branch of Antashka, the country's leading environmental NGO, established and active in Ireland since 1948, I've been asked to make some comments about the negative environmental impacts which can be expected to arise from this massive installation. Should it be allowed to go ahead? As in any statement made by anybody in Antashka, we have to ensure that it can be backed up by scientific research. It would be foolish for anyone representing Antashka to make false or negative claims. The BIM admission that there would be an environmental impact on Galway Bay says it all for me. I'm pleased to be here in support of all those organisations and individuals who have expressed concern about this proposal to place an industrial scale salmon cage installation in Galway Bay. It will not be at a deep sea location as it was first claimed to be, but this massive collection of cages is in fact to be located in water depths varying from 18 metres to 26 metres above seabed, and at a distance from land 1 mile from Inishia and approximately 4 miles from the beaches of Inverin. These cages will be capable of producing 15,000 tonnes of farmed salmon per annum. That amounts to a staggering 7.2 million fish being stored in Galway Bay, with an estimated effluent output which is claimed to be the equivalent to the sewage output of towns 2 or 3 times the size of Galway. The other end of this story is that to produce 1 kilogram of farmed salmon, 4 kilograms of wild-caught fish is needed, and this at a time when a huge number of the world's fisheries are being, turn over the page, overfished. It's important to ensure that fish going into salmon food is sustainably caught from responsible operators. Worldwide, salmon farming is on the increase and there will be further pressure on this resource. I'd just like to say that in other countries where salmon farming is a major industry, a deadly virus is threatening fish farms. Infectious salmon anemia, or ISA, is the disease concerned. Marine Harvest, the Norwegian company which is showing most interest in operating in Galway Bay facility, is a major player in Chile. It was reported in the New York Times on September the 4th, 2008, the Chile government, which produces 664,000 tonnes in 2007, has introduced measures to improve the sanitary conditions of its salmon industry and reduce the levels of antibiotics being used to treat the fish. In this article it was reported that Chilean salmon producers are using an estimated 70 to 300 times more antibiotics to produce a tonne of salmon in Chile than are their counterparts in Norway and in other places. With continuing concern in Ireland over safety issues involved in our beef industry, what levels of concern should we have about the amount of antibiotics and other chemicals that may be used to control lice and other problem diseases involved in the salmon farming industry here? We are told that only recommended levels of approved veterinary medicines will be used to control diseases at any facility in Galway. Who will be responsible for controlling this? One of our concerns is that BIM are being slightly misleading in the way they present their statistics. This has already been mentioned. The mortality of salmon attributed to sea lice is indeed around 1% in absolute terms. But with a 90 to 95% mortality rate out at sea, due to a wider range of factors, that amounts to 1% out of the remaining 5 to 10%
which return to this which is definitely significant. It means the mortality of approximately 10 to 20% of the salmon that would return, say if there were no fish farm. With salmon farmers declining so rapidly, this 1% is quite important if stocks are not to suffer so badly out at sea. Perhaps this be called a small risk, as BIM have said, but as the situation stands, it cannot be acceptable if we are to conserve and grow our wild salmon stocks. Can I make a final point quickly, and that's this, that Antashka supports the sustainable development of aquaculture. However, the granting of licences must be in keeping with other objectives to the development of